Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Leah. Thanks. And Charlie and the museum, thanks. This has been fun for me. We have a few people turn out. I hope we can get more maybe as time goes on. But it's a fun event. Well, we're talking about, I get to pick my subjects. So we've had some varied subjects so far this year because they're all people that I enjoy. And tonight is on Mark Twain, my favorite American author. Mark Twain, I think, was the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest American author, and many others agree that his Huck Finn set a tone for writing that has kind of let out ever since it was first published in 1885. So much of Mark Twain deals with quotes, and I've got a few quotes tonight. He gets quoted all the time, and sometimes the quotes aren't accurate. So I've tried to, I don't know why, he's one of those guys that they quote Mark Twain, and yet, you know, like with Lincoln, sometimes he didn't say the things they quote from him, but we do have a set of what we think are accurate quotes. Well, Mark Twain came in with a comet. I brought one little book on Halley's Comet here. Comes back around the United States every 75, 76 years. He came in with the comet in 1835. And this is a quote from him. He said, this was from 1909. I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. The Almighty has said, no doubt, now here are these two unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together. Oh, I am looking forward to that. He was only one day off. One day off. The comet came in when he died. Mark Twain passed away at his home on April 21st, 1910, exactly one day after Halley's Comet buzzed by. Anyway, prophetic in that extent. Found some fun things about him. We all know his real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, and his parents moved to Hannibal, a town on the Mississippi. I don't know how many of you have been to Hannibal, seen his place, but it's fun to go there and relive a little of it. His education, he didn't have much. Not formal, he had a lot of education, but he was self-educated. And one of the most interesting facts about Mark Twain is that when his father died when he was age 11, he had to go to work, like many people did, to support his family. And he worked at various jobs. He started working for his brother, Orion, who had a local newspaper. And that got him doing some typesetting and all that early on when he was young. But he dropped out of that soon, and he went searching in other areas. Many of you know he was a steamboat pilot for a while. He ran a steamboat because Hannibal's right on the Mississippi. And he ran the boat for several years. In fact, he was the pilot to a boat called the Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania was quite successful until it blew up. And the sad thing about that is a number of people were killed in that, including his younger brother, who he'd asked to come work for him. So Twain never really got over that death because he felt like he was partly his responsibility, having talked his young brother to come work with him on the boat. But he did get his pilot's license, as they called it, a couple years after the death of his brother and after losing the boat. And he went back to work on the river, in fact, until the Civil War. In the Civil War, all of the commercial traffic was closed down on the Mississippi for the period of the war. So you just had military ships and movements of troops and so on across there. And Twain actually joined a Confederate unit for 2 weeks. He was in a Confederate unit, and all they did is march. They marched for a couple of weeks, and they disbanded when they found that a Union general was coming after him by the name of Grant. They decided they didn't know, Grant didn't have a great reputation at the time. He was just starting out, but they didn't want to do anything. He got him in trouble with the Yankees. So he quit, and he quit the war too. He headed west with his brother Orion again. And his brother Orion was appointed by Lincoln to be the territorial secretary of Nevada Territory. And so he went with his brother Orion to Nevada for a while and worked at the Enterprise newspaper there in Virginia City. And then he went on to San Francisco for a while and worked for a paper there. He kind of went back and forth. He got into mining, silver mining for a while. But he never hit it rich there. He was only in it for a few months. Decided to go back to writing. Well, you all know that he got his pen name from his pilot work on the Mississippi. As the boats would come in, it would be 4 Twain, 3 Twain, Mark Twain. Two units. It would be amount to 12 feet. When the water got down to 12 feet, that's 2 Twain or Mark Twain, and that was as close to the landing place as the boats could come, so to be safely. So I thought Mark Twain was a good name. That wasn't his first pen name. He started using that in California and Nevada later, but he had a number of them he tried. One of them I can't pronounce, but it was W. Epaminondas Adrastus Blab. And that one didn't work out too much. And so he went with Thomas Jefferson Snodgrass, and he kind of liked that for a while. But he ended up with Mark Twain. So we're kind of grateful that he bypassed Blab and Snodgrass for Twain. Anyway, his first famous work had to do with a jumping frog of Calaveras County. He had a friend that was working for the San Francisco newspaper he worked for a while, who said that there was a friend of his that was writing a book, and he wanted to include a humorous story about a jumping frog in Calaveras County, California during the gold rush. And Twain wrote the thing up, but then he missed the book. The book was already published when he got it done. And so he just went ahead and submitted it anyway, and the editors thought it was so great they came out with a separate edition, a book called The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and that put him on the map as Mark Twain, the writer. He'd read newspaper things before that, but that was the first one that really got him going. He wrote a couple of dozen books during his career. The two most famous are, of course, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and I've got other Twain things, but I don't know where they are. So I'll be frank with you, the collection's too big. But I went out and hunted some of the ones that I know where they are, and brought those tonight. So maybe I can show you those. First of all, when Tom Sawyer hit, this is what it looked like. It was in a blue cover. This is a first edition here, and I've got a couple of these, but it came out the year of America's centennial, 1876, and the public really ate it up. So that's what Tom Sawyer looked like originally. This is a copy I brought. I questioned whether I should bring it, but I thought I would. The rarest copy of Tom Sawyer is the one that came out before they made a correction on, they had two. The only way you can tell a first printing of the first edition is that they had a blank sheet between the half title. The half title is like that, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And the title page had, in between them, they wasted 2 pages of blank on the first printing. So that's how you know a first printing, okay? And the first printing is quite rare and expensive. This one got somewhat ruined. You can see that it's, you ask me why, you see who it's signed by here, Mark Twain. And it's got an inscription to Joseph H. Twitzel from his true friend S.L. Clemens, Christmas 1876. And it's even got Twitchell's book plate. Twitchell was a neighbor. I've been to Mark Twain's home. I don't know how many of you have been to Hartford and seen his home. He had a 20-room mansion there he lived in for a while before he went bankrupt. Anyway, that's where he wrote Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Been to the room where he wrote Huck Finn. He had a neighbor down the way by the name of Edward C. Twitchell, and this has a book plate from his neighbor, Edward C. Twitchell. The only problem with that is that Twitchell's book plate has a misspelling on his name. It's got 2 L's and Twitchell only had 1. And the inscription looks mighty good, but as it turns out, this is a forgery by Mark Hoffman. It's a rather famous forgery by Mark Hoffman. And at any rate, I acquired that during that period. That's enough said on him. But the handwriting looks excellent, and I got to say, he does as good or better a Mark Twain as Mark himself did. Luckily, I have some other things that are genuine, but I wanted to show you that one because for a couple reasons. One is I bought, maybe we'll do a thing on Hoffman sometime, but for one thing, he would take very valuable books and inscribe them, basically ruin them. One of the most expensive I bought from him, and I don't want to get off on him other than just give you another example, was the first edition Book of Mormon that he had inscribed by Joseph Smith that I bought at one time. He did 2 of those as far as we know. Another guy in Rhode Island bought the other one. And it took years for both of us to figure that out. But at any rate, going on with Mark Twain would have got a kick out of that, incidentally. This is another copy that I really love. This you all know Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and Mark based the story on a friend of his that had the name of Tom Sawyer that actually rescued 90 people from one of those Mississippi boats when it collided with another, and they were going to die. So he named his hero Tom Sawyer after him. Becky Thatcher, you will recall, was the girlfriend, and Becky Thatcher was Twain's girlfriend. Here's just a little bit on her. Her real name was Anna Laura Hawkins, before she was married to a doctor by the name of Fraser. Laura Hawkins was only a couple of years old when she moved with her family from Georgetown, Kentucky to Hannibal, and they lived just across the street from the Clemens family. Laura lived in a 2-story frame house on Hill Street. Mark and I, she said, started going to school the same year. Mrs. Fraser said. He was 7 and I was 6. Our houses were across the street from each other, right here in Hannibal. Mark had long golden curls. This is actually a picture of the Laura Hawkins, Becky Thatcher's home. He said he had long golden curls hanging over his shoulders. He used to carry my books to school every morning and carry them home in the afternoon. At any rate, and he'd treat me to apples and oranges and divide his candy with me. In the winter, Mark spent most of his time on the ice. I couldn't skate. He always arranged for me to go along. He used to push me along on the ice on a split-bottom chair. He was a fine skater, too. In fact, he was good at anything he undertook. The first time I ever saw Mark was on a hot summer day. He came out of his house and started showing off, turning handsprings and cutting capers. His heel hit me, and I was thrown to the ground and knocked unconscious. I recall hearing the children talking about how scared Mark was, end quote. But tragedy, like I say, struck when he was 11. His father, who was the local justice of the peace, passed away of a heart attack, and was only 43. And so at age 11, he went to work, and I've talked a little bit about that. She went on to the Van Rensselaer Presbyterian Academy, which was in Missouri, and married a James W. Fraser physician in 1858. They had 2 children, both sons. Samuel lost his younger brother Henry in that boiler explosion on the steamboat that I mentioned. And he was one of only 3 surviving children of 7 in that Clemens family. They didn't have much success with their children living. And though heartbroken, Samuel got his pilot's license in 1859 and continued to work the Mississippi until the Civil War started. Anyway, Samuel joined his brother Orion on a westward journey that he detailed in his semi-autobiographical book, Roughing It. I've got a first edition of Roughing It. I don't know how many of you read it. But it's interesting to Latter-day Saints because he stopped off in Salt Lake. And he spent time, he was invited to see Brigham's harem, as he called it, at the Beehive House. And he was mostly interested in the bell that would call all the families together for evening prayer at the Beehive House. And he made a couple unkind statements about some of the wives that the Brigham deserved a medal for getting so many ugly women off out of the service. Anyway, and he called, while he was here, he read part of the Book of Mormon, claimed it was chloroform in print, will put you to sleep. I don't think he read the whole book. But anyway, he had funny things to say about everybody, and not just us. He wrote a whole book about the Christian Scientists, other religions that weren't very positive later on. In 1870, the evening before he married Olivia Langdon, Samuel scribbled something on a note card, which he then passed and mailed to Laura Hawkins, Becky Thatcher, his first girlfriend's brother in Hannibal, with instructions to deliver it to her. Whatever that note contained went to the grave with them both. So we have no idea what that note contained. We don't know much about the adult life of Laura Hawkins, Becky Thatcher. Her husband died in 1875, and later in 1895 she hired as a matron of the Hannibal Home for Orphans and Indigents. But this is her copy of Tom Sawyer, and it was kind of a treat to get this years ago. And it's signed by her, Laura Hawkins Frazier, and she gave it to her son later. It's a 1902 edition. They were still printing the book like it looked in 1876. But the reason she got this one is that Twain visited her finally in 1902 in Hannibal and gave her this copy of the book. So we got Becky Thatcher's copy here with us tonight, which is kind of fun. Incidentally, I forgot about it, and I remembered it today when got it. There's just too many things in the collection, but it's kind of a fun book. Well, Twain's masterpiece, of course, was Huckleberry Finn, and he used a boy that he grew up with there as kind of his model. A couple other things about him that I've learned. I've mentioned as a baby, he outlived 4 of his siblings. Let's see, what haven't I mentioned here? He didn't strike gold in California, but he struck literary gold there. That's where he first got started. He based Huckleberry Finn on a close friend of his that lived there, that they could never figure out whatever happened to the guy. He said, in Huckleberry Finn, I've drawn Tom Blankenship exactly as he was. He was ignorant, unwashed, insufficiently fed, but he had a good heart as ever any boy had, he said. What is certain from the time of his publications is that Huckleberry Finn has been controversial. Within 3 weeks of the release of the book, the library in Concord, Massachusetts banned it as being filthy trash. And so from the very beginning, the book has met with some bad, and even before the book came out, this is a rare edition because this is Huck Finn in leather. They only did a few of those in leather, but I wanted to show you something here because when the book came out, there was one of the engravers, and they never got a hold of him, figured out who it was. On on this illustration on page 283. I don't know if you can see that. You can come up and look at it. But Uncle Silas here has a bulge in his pants, okay? And it was thought to be something seriously bad, so Twain had 30,000 copies of this book. He took this page out and inserted the reprint of the page. We don't know exactly what it was, but when they changed the print, Silas still has a little bit of a bulge here in this first edition. Twain was so mad about that, but he later said, well, that'll sell another 25,000 copies. Well, you know, they weren't really thinking of that in those terms then, but that's what it did. Now, the best copy I've got of Huck Finn is this one. I've just brought the blue copies. Normally, the Huck Finn was green, and so I've got a couple of firsts that are in green, and that was the copy, the color they went with. They went up with blue so it would match Tom Sawyer. It took seven years to write this book, and so they went with blue in doing it. I'll show you this one though. I want to just mention this letter here. This is a letter of Mark Twain, and it's written from Hartford to his publisher, Osgood and Company, in 1883, and he says that he's been working on the Great American Play, and he says you need to get a copy of it so you can read it. He said this was during the time he was writing Huck Finn, and he said I've been working for very long days on the Great American Play to show for it. Let Howells, that's William Dean Howells, that worked with him on some of his books, let him come right along as soon as he's ready and fill in the gaps. I'm leaving for him. I hit upon the plot of this play in church Sunday morning. Don't tell me it doesn't pay to go to church. So that was his compliment going to church. He hit upon the Great American Play. Well, this is my favorite copy of Huck Finn. This is also in the blue binding, which he didn't think, and you can tell, showed up Huck and showed the cover that well, so he went with green, and the green showed up a lot better. He had a visitor one night. This was in a few years later, but it must have been right after this book was published because they went with green cover. And he had a Russian visitor that came to his home by the name of, his anglicized name is Stepniak. I can't pronounce his Russian name. But this guy was on a tour around the world. He hit Europe and the English-speaking world, and then hit the United States, trying to go to famous homes and famous people to raise money to overthrow the Tsar in Russia. That was his goal. And that's the goal he came to Twain's home in Hartford with. This book wasn't known to exist before the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was in Moscow, Russia, all the years up till then, since it was signed and inscribed by him. It's Twain's handwriting. He's inscribed it to Mr. Stepniak. It's a full page. And he says, my dear Mr. Stepniak, last night, after breaking up for the night, Mrs. Clemens said, quote, he said there were 5 perfect novels in the world, but now I run them over in my mind and there were only 4. He certainly didn't name the 5th, unquote. To which I said, he couldn't, my dear, with delicacy while I was present. I beg to lay number 5 before your feet. Sincerely yours, S.L. Clemens. It's a great inscription, and one like this would have been in a library for decades, but because of the fall of Soviet Union, it came out of Moscow in the 1990s, and I was able to pick it up at an auction. It's kind of a fun book. Any rate, Twain went into business when he made it big after Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and he was a lousy investor. He's a good writer, but a terrible investor. He sank money into a couple of bad investments. One was a typesetting machine, an automatic one back then. He put $200,000 in. Now, the average earnings of a family was around $1,200. at that time. So $200,000 was a lot of money to put into this, and he lost it. Conversely, when he offered the chance to invest in a new invention, the telephone, Twain reportedly turned down its creator, Alexander Graham Bell. He probably would have made money on that one. But he invests kind of like I do. Anyway, Twain himself invented a variety of products, including a self-pasting scrapbook. I've got one of those, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But it was a scrapbook that had, paste on it already. You just had to lick it, and you could put down your newspapers or whatever you wanted to paste up. That was actually the only successful venture that he went into after his book writing. He invented an elastic strap for pants, and that didn't go over at all, so he lost that. But the big one was that typesetting machine. In 1891, Twain closed his 25-room Hartford home where he'd lived since 1874. Have any of you been in that home? That was kind of fun to go there. My wife went there first, and then a few years later we were on our mission to Massachusetts, and we stopped there. See, it's right next to Julia Ward House. It's next to another writer. It's really famous one. I'm not thinking right now. But at any rate, he closed his house in Hartford in 1891 and relocated his family to Europe in order to live more cheaply. He also hoped the change of scenery would help his wife, who was in poor health. Nevertheless, in 1894, following the failure of his publishing company he had founded a decade earlier, he had to declare bankruptcy. Next year, he embarked on an around-the-world speaking tour to try to earn money back. And he did pretty well on that, earned enough to get himself out of trouble. You may recall that he got out of the Confederate Army because they thought they were getting chased by General Grant. Later on in his life, when General Grant was facing his own end after he'd been the President of the United States, and of course the general that led us through the Civil War, Grant had made a lot of bad investments, and he was in abject poverty at the end of his life, dying of cancer. And Twain befriended him and wrote General Grant's biography for him. And as a result of that, Grant's widow got $500,000, which was back then oodles more money than it sounds now, and got out of debt at the end of Grant's life. The Clemenses had 4 children, including a son who died as a toddler and 2 daughters who passed away in their 20s. And Olivia, like I say, his wife, died at age 58 in 1904. And of course, Twain himself died on April 21st, 1910. His health had been going downhill for a while. It's interesting, among his many friends he had was Helen Keller, that we talked about last month, and Thomas Edison. And there is actually a film of Mark Twain, and it was filmed at his last home by his friend Thomas Edison. So if you look that up online, you can see there's actually a film we have of him. He had 1 daughter that survived him, and that was Clara. Over here you're going to see a letter from Clara, and she's responding to a fellow that just wanted anything written by her father, and so she sent him a page of manuscript from a book that Mark Twain never finished. He started on it, and Life magazine years ago published what he'd written of it. It was entitled Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer Among the Indians, and never completed, but Twain wrote it, and that's where she gave that. But the reason I mentioned Clara is that she lived to be 88. She was the only child that survived past her 20s, and when she passed away, she had a daughter who lived. I can't pronounce her name. Her name was Nina Gabrilowicz, who passed away in 1966, childless. So, like Lincoln, like Washington, Twain has no living direct descendants. I don't know why that's the case in some famous people's lives, but there are no direct descendants of Mark Twain alive today. I think one of the fun things are the Mark Twain quotes, and I want to just end with these. I just picked a few, but there's really too many to share. They're all good. Some of you have heard of before. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. We've all heard that. That was Mark Twain. It's better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you are a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Those are all authentic quotes from him. Age is an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. I'm going to do a few of these because I think they're so good. These are actual ones. Suppose you were an idiot and suppose you were a member of Congress, but I repeat myself. All you need in this life is ignorance and confidence, and then success is sure. Isn't that true in so many ways? Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than anything on which it is poured. That's great advice. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. Many of these we've heard before, but these are Twainisms. The only way to keep your health is to eat what you don't want, drink what you don't like, and do what you'd rather not. The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. In the first place, God made idiots. That was for practice, and then he made school boards. Anyway, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. My mother had a great deal of trouble with me, but I think she enjoyed it. A man who carries a cat by the tail learns something he can learn in no other way. Incidentally, it's the only animal he really loved were cats. He had 19 of them at one time. They said when he went on a tour around the world that he would rent cats to stay in his room. And he had quite a few quotes about cats. He loved cats for some reason. The lack of money is the root of all evil. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. By land, they're not making it anymore. Many of these we've heard many times. Patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government only when it deserves it. Do the right thing, it will gratify some people and astonish all the rest. I am an old man and have known a great many troubles, but most of them have never happened. Go to heaven for the climate and hell for the company. It ain't those parts of the Bible that I can't understand that bothers me, it's the parts I do understand. Giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I know because I've done it thousands of times. Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to the possibilities and truth isn't. You've all heard this, golf is a good walk spoiled. That's Mark Twain. The best way to cheer yourself up is to try to cheer somebody else up. Don't let schooling interfere with your education. That's a great quote. He didn't get to do much formal education. His days with Becky Thatcher only lasted for a couple years. When his father died, he went to work. But they said he was among the most well-read persons in the country. He constantly read all the time when he wasn't writing. Do the thing you fear most, and the death of fear is certain. Action speaks louder than words, but not nearly as often. The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. You've heard that one before. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. This is the ideal life. Anyway, The Nile ain't just a river in Egypt. Denial, in other words. Denial, the Nile. A man's character may be learned from the adjectives which he habitually uses in conversation. When you fish for love, bait with your heart, not your brain. I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. A lot of these are pretty famous, but they originated with him, as far as we know. All generalizations are false, including this one. There is no distinctly American criminal class except Congress. Never pick a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel. There are basically two types of people: people who accomplish things and people who claim to have accomplished things. The first group is less crowded. Don't go around saying the world owes you a living. The world owes you nothing. It was here first. Let us endeavor to live so that when we come to die, even the undertaker will be sorry. I like that. Thunder is good, thunder is impressive, but it is lightning that does the work. We have the best government that money can buy. You've all heard that one. The human race has one really effective weapon, and that is laughter. Life would be infinitely happier if we could only be born at the age of 80 and gradually approach 18. Be careful about reading health books. You may die of a misprint. Boy, ain't that true. Loyalty to petrified opinion never yet broke a chain or freed a human soul. Don't part with your illusions. When they are gone, you may still exist, but you have ceased to live. I don't like to commit myself about heaven and hell. You see, I have friends in both places. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. It is by the goodness of God that in our country we have these three unspeakably precious things: freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and the prudence never to practice either of them. It is curious that physical courage should be so common in the world and moral courage so rare. Clothes make the man. Naked people have little or no influence on society. A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read. The right word may be effective, but no word was ever as effective as a rightly timed pause. I came in with Haley's comment. I've read this. It is coming again next year and expect to go out with it. It'll be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Haley's comment. And anyway, he did go out with it. Cauliflower is nothing but cabbage with a college education. So, many a small thing is made large by the right kind of advertising. Laws control the lesser man, right conduct controls the greater one. A man is never more truthful than when he acknowledges himself as a liar. Wrinkles should merely indicate where smiles have been. Everything has its limit. Iron ore cannot be educated into gold. It's no wonder that truth is stranger than fiction, because fiction has to make sense. When in doubt, tell the truth. The more things are forbidden, the more popular they become. If you hold a cat by the tail, you learn things you cannot learn any other way. Maybe that's why I like cats so much. I don't know. But who prays for Satan? Who in 18 centuries has had the common humanity to pray for the one sinner that needed it the most? Grief can take care of itself, but to get the full value of joy, you must have somebody to divide it with. Be careless in your dress if you must, but keep a tidy soul. I was seldom able to see an opportunity until it ceased to be one. Why isn't that true sometimes? We miss the opportunities sometimes. Under certain circumstances, urgent circumstances, desperate circumstances, profanity provides a relief denied even to prayer. There is no sadder sight than a young pessimist. Necessity is the mother of taking chances. The man who does not read good books has no advantage over the man who can't read. Often it does seem such a pity that Noah and his party did not miss the boat. A man cannot be comfortable without his own approval. Let me just jump through a few more here. Get the idea. What's the difference between a taxidermist and a tax collector? The taxidermist takes only your skin. When people do not respect us, we are sharply offended. Yet in his private heart, no man much respects himself. The very ink with which history is written is merely fluid prejudice. The most interesting information comes from children, for they tell all they know, and then they stop. Familiarity breeds contempt and children. This is one of my favorites. Glenn Beck asked me to read this on his show once, and so I did. I'll end with this because I think I like it. He was down at the Pickwick Club in New Orleans when somebody asked him to just write out a little statement of your philosophy. And he wrote this: "When the Lord finished the world, he pronounced it good." That's what I said about my first work too. But time, I tell you, time takes the confidence out of these incautious early opinions. It is more than likely that he thinks about the world now pretty much as I think about my first book, The Innocents Abroad. The fact is, there's a trifle too much water in both. Truly yours, Mark Twain. Anyway, he had a way with words. I could have gone on and on. There's another 10 pages of quotes, but there were some good ones there. And we still quote Twain a lot, don't we? Without even knowing we're quoting him. So I think that says something about him too. I spoke about Helen Keller last time, and Helen Keller was a great friend of Mark Twain's. And in fact, Mark Twain is the first one to call Annie Sullivan the miracle worker. That came from Mark Twain. He did a lot of good in the world and left quite a heritage in literature and other things, much as Helen Keller did, as we talked about last month, in her life. And their politics may be something we don't agree with or don't like, but the life as a whole has left a life of service and a tribute to their care for others. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it.